I believe in America. Those four quiet words do not introduce a crime story. They introduce a disappointment. A man stands in a dark office on the day of a wedding, asking another man for justice because the world outside has failed him. The courthouse gave him procedures. Society offered sympathy. Neither gave him what he believed he deserved. So he crossed a different threshold. That is where the story of the Corleone family truly begins. Not with gunfire. Not with power. Not even with organized crime. It begins with trust. The room itself feels almost timeless. Outside, music drifts through the warm summer air as guests laugh, dance, and celebrate. Inside, everything slows down. Every visitor enters with the same expression. They do not arrive because they admire wealth. They arrive because they believe the man sitting behind the desk can solve problems that no institution seems willing to solve. Vito Corleone does not rush anyone. He listens. He asks questions. He remembers names. Most importantly, he understands something that governments, courts, and corporations often forget. People rarely come looking for laws. They come looking for certainty. That quiet certainty becomes the foundation of an empire. Every favor creates another bond. Every promise becomes another thread connecting families, businesses, and neighborhoods. The network grows almost invisibly, not because people fear it at first, but because they depend on it. That is the first uncomfortable truth hidden beneath the legend of the Godfather. The Corleones are not introduced as monsters invading society. They appear as a family filling an empty space inside society. And that difference changes everything. Around Vito, every relationship has meaning. His children carry expectations they never chose. His advisors protect more than business. Friends become extensions of the family itself. Loyalty is not measured by contracts or salaries. It is measured by memory. Who stood beside you when everyone else walked away? Who answered the phone when nobody else would? Who kept their word? In this world, those questions matter more than legal documents. That is why the wedding is more than a celebration. It is a living demonstration of a social order. Every smile, every handshake, every respectful nod quietly reinforces the same idea. Belonging has value. Family has value. Reputation has value. People are not simply attending a party. They are renewing a covenant. Yet beneath the warmth lies an uneasy silence. A system built on personal loyalty is remarkably strong, but it is also dangerously fragile. It depends on individuals making impossible choices when loyalty and morality begin pulling in opposite directions. For now, that conflict remains hidden behind polite conversations and generous gestures. But history has a way of testing every promise. The Corleone family believes they can preserve order in a world that increasingly rewards ambition over honor, speed over patience, and power over restraint. That belief becomes far more than the philosophy of one household. It becomes the force that will shape every decision that follows. And once a family accepts the responsibility of becoming everyone else's last refuge, every future choice carries a cost that cannot be postponed forever. The invisible currency inside this world is not cash. It is obligation. Once someone accepts help from Vito Corleone, the exchange does not end when the problem disappears. It begins there. No invoice arrives in the mail. No lawyer drafts a contract. The agreement lives inside memory, carried from one conversation to the next. That is why people leave his office looking lighter than when they entered. They have not purchased a service. They have entered a relationship. And relationships are remarkably difficult to escape. This quiet system reaches far beyond the walls of the family home. Shop owners greet one another differently because they know who stood beside them during difficult years. Politicians remember old conversations that never appeared in public records. Business owners think twice before refusing a request, not because they fear immediate punishment, but because trust once broken rarely returns. Respect spreads through neighborhoods the way roots spread beneath a forest. Invisible, connected, almost impossible to separate. To an outsider, it looks irrational. Why would successful people willingly place themselves under the influence of one family? Because certainty has extraordinary value when uncertainty becomes exhausting. People can tolerate hardship. They struggle to tolerate unpredictability. The Corleones understand this better than almost anyone around them. When Vito makes a promise, he speaks slowly, never decorating his words with unnecessary confidence. He does not guarantee perfection. He guarantees commitment. That distinction explains why so many people believe him. His children grow up inside this atmosphere without fully realizing how unusual it is. For Sonny, loyalty feels instinctive. Decisions come quickly, driven by emotion and fierce devotion to those he loves. For Tom Hagen, loyalty resembles careful craftsmanship. Every conversation, every negotiation, every compromise serves the larger stability of the family. Michael stands apart. He watches more than he speaks. He carries himself like someone who respects his family without believing he must become part of its future. There is distance in his eyes. Not rejection. Hope. Hope that another life might still be possible. That quiet distance becomes one of the most important emotional currents flowing beneath everything else. The family believes every generation should inherit responsibility. Michael quietly imagines inheritance as a choice rather than a destiny. For the moment, no one forces the issue. The wedding continues. Music fills the air. Children run across the gardens. Guests raise glasses in celebration. From the outside, nothing appears fragile. Yet every strong institution eventually faces a question it cannot avoid. Can personal loyalty survive when the world around it begins changing faster than tradition can adapt? America is changing. Business is changing. Power itself is changing. Old rules built on honor increasingly collide with new ambitions built on speed and expansion. People who once valued patience now reward efficiency. Relationships that once took decades to build can suddenly be replaced by opportunity. The Corleones do not notice a single dramatic shift. They notice dozens of small ones. A delayed response, an unfamiliar face, a conversation that feels slightly colder than it should. These moments seem insignificant on their own. Together, they suggest something far more unsettling. The network that once grew naturally through gratitude is beginning to encounter forces that do not recognize gratitude as valuable at all. And when a family builds its entire identity on loyalty, the greatest danger is never the enemy standing outside the door. It is the moment someone inside begins to wonder whether loyalty alone is still enough to protect everything they love. The first real burden of leadership is discovering that every decision protects something while sacrificing something else. Vito Corleone understands this long before anyone around him says it out loud. Each person who walks through his door brings more than a request. They bring competing loyalties, wounded pride, family expectations, and fears they can barely describe. There is never a perfect solution. There is only the choice that leaves the fewest people abandoned. That quiet reality shapes the entire family. The children do not simply inherit a respected name. They inherit unfinished promises. Every favor their father grants becomes another thread tied around the future of the next generation. Michael still believes those threads can be untied. Whenever he stands beside Kay, his posture changes almost without noticing. The conversations become lighter. The future feels open: college, military service, ordinary work, marriage. The possibilities resemble the lives lived by millions of Americans who never need to ask permission before making their own choices. He introduces his family with affection, but also with distance. "That is my family," he quietly suggests through his actions. "It is not me." Those words carry remarkable confidence. They also carry remarkable innocence. Because belonging to a family like this is not something measured by where you stand today. It is measured by where everyone expects you to stand tomorrow. Vito sees this without forcing the issue. He never orders Michael to follow him. He simply assumes that one day responsibility will find its rightful owner. That assumption reflects an older understanding of family. Individual dreams matter. Collective survival matters more. The contrast between those two beliefs slowly widens. Not through arguments, through silence. Meanwhile, the world surrounding the Corleones grows less patient with old traditions. New players view relationships differently. To them, trust is temporary. Agreements exist only while they remain profitable. Speed replaces ritual. Expansion replaces restraint. What once felt like a shared code of honor now feels increasingly fragile. Tom Hagen notices the shift first. His conversations become longer. His pauses become more thoughtful. He begins asking questions that would have seemed unnecessary only a few years earlier. Can every promise still be kept? Can every alliance still be trusted? Can yesterday's loyalty survive tomorrow's opportunity? Even Sonny, whose confidence usually fills every room, begins reacting with greater urgency whenever uncertainty appears. His instinct is always to protect the family immediately, to answer pressure with strength before hesitation creates weakness. His heart is unquestionably loyal, but loyalty driven entirely by emotion often creates consequences that careful patience might have avoided. Vito watches all of this quietly. He rarely interrupts. Experience has taught him that people reveal themselves most clearly when they believe no one is judging them. That patience becomes his greatest strength. It also becomes his greatest burden, because every passing day makes one truth increasingly difficult to ignore. The family is no longer defending only itself. It is defending an entire way of understanding trust, honor, and responsibility in a society that is rapidly rewriting the rules. And once those rules begin changing, every personal decision becomes something larger than a family matter. It becomes a choice about what kind of world deserves to survive. Michael still believes he can remain outside that choice. The tragedy is not that he lacks courage. It is that history rarely asks whether someone wishes to inherit its weight before placing it squarely upon their shoulders. Inheritance is rarely announced. It arrives quietly, disguised as responsibility. For years, Michael believed that the future belonged to the person who made the best individual choices. Study hard. Serve honorably. Build a family. Leave the past where it belongs. His father believed something very different. No one truly chooses the family into which they are born. They only choose how faithfully they carry its weight. The difference between those two ideas seems almost invisible at first. Then life begins testing them. Inside the Corleone household, conversations become increasingly shaped by what is left unsaid. Around the dinner table, affection remains genuine, yet every exchange carries another layer beneath it. Advice sounds like tradition. Concern sounds like expectation. Even silence begins to resemble a question waiting for an answer. Who will protect everything that has been built? Vito never speaks of leadership as a prize. He speaks of it as a burden. A person who leads must absorb fear without spreading it, must hear anger without multiplying it, must make decisions that satisfy almost no one while preventing everyone from losing everything. That understanding explains why he rarely raises his voice. Authority in his eyes does not come from demanding obedience. It comes from becoming the person others instinctively seek when uncertainty fills the room. Michael watches this more carefully than anyone realizes. He notices that his father wins loyalty before asking for it. He notices that gratitude lasts longer than intimidation. Most of all, he notices something deeply unsettling. Every person who leaves that office walks away believing they have been understood. That realization lingers in his mind far longer than he wants to admit. Meanwhile, Tom Hagen quietly keeps the machinery of relationships moving. Every visit, every conversation, every favor recorded only in memory reminds him that institutions survive through continuity rather than charisma alone. One respected leader may build a network. Only a worthy successor can preserve it. That thought grows heavier with each passing season. Outside the family, America continues changing at remarkable speed. Wealth expands. New industries emerge. Old neighborhoods transform. Success increasingly belongs to those willing to move faster than tradition itself. Yet rapid change creates an unexpected side effect. People begin trusting systems less and personal relationships more. The more complicated society becomes, the more comforting it feels to know someone whose word still means something. That paradox explains why the Corleones continue attracting respect from people who would never describe themselves as admirers of organized crime. They are responding to something older than legality. They are responding to reliability. Reliability has become scarce, and anything scarce inevitably becomes powerful. Michael senses this contradiction every time he steps between the ordinary American life he imagines and the family he cannot completely leave behind. Kay sees a man planning tomorrow. His father sees a man preparing for yesterday's unfinished promises. Neither perspective is dishonest. Neither is complete. The distance between those two visions grows smaller with every passing day, until they begin overlapping in ways that nobody inside the family can fully control. By now, the greatest question is no longer whether the Corleones possess enough influence to survive. The real question is whether anyone can inherit an entire system of loyalty without slowly surrendering pieces of themselves along the way. And once leadership demands not only wisdom but personal sacrifice, even the strongest foundation begins revealing the hidden cost beneath every promise that once seemed unbreakable. Power has a strange way of changing its purpose. At first, people seek it because they want to protect something they love. Later, they discover that the very act of protecting it demands even more power than before. That realization slowly reshapes Michael. Not in a single dramatic moment, not through a speech, through repetition. Each conversation that once seemed simple now carries hidden consequences. Every family gathering becomes another reminder that personal freedom is becoming harder to separate from inherited responsibility. Every problem brought before the Corleones quietly asks the same question. If you have the ability to prevent suffering, do you still have the right to walk away? Michael resists the question for as long as he can. He continues imagining a future built on ordinary happiness. A quiet home, honest work, a life where love is measured by presence rather than sacrifice. Kay believes in that future because Michael believes in it. She sees intelligence without arrogance, strength without cruelty. She sees a man capable of choosing his own path. The audience wants to believe her. So does Michael. Yet the world surrounding the family refuses to remain still. Relationships that once felt permanent become uncertain. Trusted allies begin weighing loyalty against opportunity. Rivals recognize that the old balance of respect is beginning to weaken. Every hesitation creates space for someone else to redefine the rules. Inside the family, each member reacts differently. Sonny answers uncertainty with immediate action. He believes decisiveness discourages those searching for weakness. Tom continues searching for solutions through patience and negotiation. He understands that preserving stability often requires accepting uncomfortable compromises before they become unavoidable crises. Vito remains remarkably calm. Age has taught him that panic usually produces exactly the future people are trying to avoid. One evening, Michael watches his father sitting quietly after everyone else has left the room. For several minutes, neither of them speaks. Finally, Vito asks a simple question. What do you think holds a family together? Michael pauses before answering. Love. His father smiles gently. Love begins it, he replies. But responsibility is what keeps it alive. The words are not delivered as a lesson. They sound almost like regret. For the first time, Michael realizes that his father has never confused authority with happiness. The respect surrounding Vito has always carried a hidden cost. Every decision has required choosing which burden could be carried and which disappointment had to be accepted. Leadership has never been freedom. It has always been sacrifice. That understanding quietly changes the way Michael sees everything around him. The office where people once came seeking favors no longer appears to him as a place of influence. It resembles a place where one person absorbs everyone else's uncertainty. Suddenly, the invisible network of obligations stretching across neighborhoods, friendships, and generations feels heavier than ever before. Michael begins recognizing that leaving the family is no longer simply a personal decision. His absence would not create an empty chair. It would create an empty promise. That possibility unsettles him more deeply than any external threat ever could. Because promises are the true foundation beneath everything the Corleones have built. If those promises begin collapsing, trust collapses with them. And once trust disappears, neither wealth, reputation, nor influence can restore what has been lost. For the first time, Michael no longer asks whether he wants the life waiting for him. Instead, another question quietly takes its place. If preserving the people he loves requires becoming someone he never intended to be, where does duty end? And where does the loss of oneself truly begin? By now, something unexpected has happened. The story has quietly shifted away from questions of crime and power. What remains is something far more familiar. Responsibility. That is the reason audiences continue following the Corleones long after they stop asking whether the family is right or wrong. They recognize something of themselves, not in the family's methods, in its burdens. Every generation inherits promises it never made. Parents sacrifice for children. Children carry expectations they never requested. Communities survive because someone accepts obligations that others would rather avoid. The Corleones simply magnify this universal experience until it becomes impossible to ignore. Michael understands this with growing clarity. He no longer views his father as a powerful man surrounded by loyal followers. He sees an aging father trying to ensure that the people he loves will remain protected after he is gone. The office has become quieter now. Each visitor still arrives seeking certainty. Yet Michael notices something different in their faces. They are not asking for miracles. They are asking someone to share the weight of decisions they cannot bear alone. Perhaps that has always been the true service Vito provides. Not solutions, shared responsibility. The realization changes Michael more profoundly than any single event ever could. He begins listening before speaking. He watches people more carefully than their words. He starts measuring success less by victory and more by stability. The transformation is subtle enough that few people notice it happening. But the audience does. The young man who once imagined freedom as independence slowly begins redefining freedom itself. Perhaps freedom is not escaping responsibility. Perhaps it is choosing which responsibilities deserve your life. That idea explains why so many viewers remain emotionally attached to Michael even as his journey grows increasingly difficult. He is not chasing power for its own sake. He is chasing the impossible dream of protecting everyone without losing himself. It is a dream many people recognize. Parents feel it. Leaders feel it. Business owners feel it. Anyone who has ever become responsible for another human being understands its quiet loneliness. That is why the Corleone family continues resonating across cultures and generations. The setting may be Italian-American. The emotions are universal. Every society has moments when institutions seem distant. Every generation experiences periods when rules appear insufficient. During those moments, people instinctively search for something older than law. Someone whose word still carries weight. Someone whose promises feel personal. Someone who makes uncertainty feel survivable. Whether that figure deserves admiration is almost beside the point. The emotional need itself is real. And that need explains why audiences often find themselves sympathizing with characters whose choices they would never wish to imitate. The Corleones represent an ancient human longing. To belong. To be protected. To know that when the world becomes unpredictable, someone will answer the door. Yet every promise carries its own hidden cost. The more people depend upon one family, the less that family belongs to itself. Private dreams slowly become public obligations. Love becomes duty. Duty becomes identity. Identity becomes a prison whose walls are built not from fear, but from devotion. By now, Michael no longer stands between two separate futures. Those futures have merged into one unavoidable path. The only uncertainty that remains is not whether he will accept the burden. It is whether any person can carry the hopes of an entire family, an entire community, and an entire legacy without eventually becoming someone even they no longer recognize. There comes a moment in every great family when inheritance stops being a conversation and becomes a reality. No ceremony announces it. No document can fully explain it. One day, everyone simply begins looking toward a different person before making their next decision. Michael notices it almost by accident. A question directed toward his father slowly turns toward him. An opinion once considered unnecessary suddenly carries unexpected weight. Even silence feels different now. People are no longer trying to understand who Michael has been. They are trying to discover who he is about to become. The change unsettles him far more than praise ever could. Because expectations are heavier than commands. Commands can be refused. Expectations become part of the way others see you. Around him, the familiar rhythms of family life continue. Shared meals, quiet conversations, small celebrations, ordinary moments that would appear insignificant to anyone watching from the outside. Yet every ordinary moment now carries extraordinary meaning. Each laugh reminds Michael of what could be lost. Each tradition reminds him why people fight so desperately to preserve them. He finally understands something his father understood years before. People rarely defend power for its own sake. They defend memories. They defend belonging. They defend the fragile feeling that someone will still be waiting when the rest of the world has moved on. That realization transforms every relationship around him. Kay still hopes that love can build a future untouched by inherited burdens. Her hope is sincere. It is also heartbreaking, because Michael has begun recognizing a truth that cannot easily be shared with someone standing outside the family. Some responsibilities cannot be explained. They can only be carried. Tom Hagen observes the growing change with quiet concern. He understands that every generation eventually reaches a point where experience can no longer be borrowed. Wisdom must become action, and action always demands a price. Even Sonny, whose instinct has always been to confront uncertainty head-on, senses that the family is approaching a crossroads unlike any they have faced before. Strength alone will not be enough. Neither will intelligence. The future now depends upon something far more difficult: the ability to preserve trust while adapting to a world that no longer rewards the values upon which that trust was built. That challenge extends far beyond one household. It explains why this story continues speaking to audiences decades after it was first written. Every generation asks the same question in different words. How much of yourself should you sacrifice to protect the people you love? There has never been a universal answer, only deeply personal ones. Perhaps that is why so many people discover themselves sympathizing with the Corleones. Not because they admire every decision, not because they approve of every choice, but because they recognize the impossible tension between duty and identity, between becoming who you wanted to be and becoming who others desperately need you to become. The office where strangers once entered seeking certainty now seems to hold an entirely different meaning. It has become a symbol, a room where promises outweigh contracts, where memory outweighs law, where one person's willingness to accept responsibility becomes the foundation beneath countless other lives. Michael stands closer to that door than ever before. Behind him lies the future he once imagined. Ahead of him waits the future everyone else already believes belongs to him. For the first time, neither path feels entirely like his own. And somewhere in that narrow space between love, loyalty, and identity, the final measure of the Corleone legacy is about to reveal itself, not through the power it can command, but through the personal cost required to preserve the faith that so many others have placed in it.